The season has barely started, and we already had the first drama for the Commanders. A devastating injury has just changed Adam Peters' plans. Dan Quinn is sending clear messages to his locker room, and there's a hidden strategy behind that. Humiliating loss that could be exactly what this team needs. Stay until the end because I'm going to reveal why this apparent catastrophe could be the best news for our season. Look, I know many of you saw that score, 48-18, against the Patriots, and felt your heart drop. I'm telling you this. Take a deep breath because that loss was exactly what Dan Quinn wanted to happen. Let's break down what really happened that night in Foxborough, because what the world saw as humiliation, I see as a masterclass in building culture. From the pregame warm-up, it was clear this was going to be different. The Patriots had Mac Jones throwing with starting receivers during warm-ups, while we had Sam Hartman working mainly with practice squad players. Bill Belichick wanted to send a message early in the season, and Quinn simply gave him exactly what he wanted. The first snap was revealing beyond. Tre'Von Henderson's touchdown return. Check the lineup. Henderson on special teams running against our coverage team that included Chris Moore, Tyre Phillips running downfield, and a mix of players most casual fans didn't know by name. This wasn't our real special teams unit. Quinn deliberately fielded players he needed to evaluate in real game situations, not those who already had secured their spots. In the first quarter, the most revealing sequence came during our second possession. Hartman entered the huddle after the defense allowed 2 quick touchdowns, and the body language of the players around him was telling. Dominique Hampton was clearly lost at linebacker, looking to the sideline after each play for confirmation that he executed correctly. Tyre Phillips at left tackle was being dominated by players New England will likely cut before the final roster. But here's what fascinates me. Quinn was on the sideline constantly taking notes. Not about schemes or tactical adjustments, but character. Evaluations. Who kept their composure when things got ugly? Who kept communicating effectively, even when the score got embarrassing? Who showed leadership when there were no cameras on them? Chris Moore was particularly disappointing because he was supposed to be a veteran presence for the young receivers. His first drop came on a basic comeback route in the slot, something he should do in his sleep after 6 years in the NFL. The second was even worse. An 8-yard curl where the ball hit him directly in the hands and just bounced off. These aren't timing errors or chemistry issues with the quarterback. These are basic fundamentals any NFL roster player should execute. Hartman showed some flashes of talent that explain why he's on the team, but also confirmed why he's nowhere, near competing for the backup job. His best moment came in the second quarter, a rollout play where he extended the play with his legs, kept his eyes downfield, and found a receiver in the seam for a 22-yard gain. That play showed natural quarterback instincts and the ability to create when protection breaks down. However, his worst moment came just 3 plays later. Facing a 3rd and 7, Hartman had a clean pocket, time, and an obviously open receiver, running a slant from the slot. Instead of making the easy throw, he panicked over phantom pressure and prematurely bailed from the pocket, running directly into 2 linebackers for a loss of 4 yards. That play encapsulates everything wrong with his mental game. Unnecessary panic at moments when composure is essential. Jaquarii Crosky-Merritt was genuinely impressive in ways that give me hope about our running back depth. His most memorable run came in the 3rd quarter, a draw play from the 25-yard line where he showed exceptional patience. The initial hole wasn't there, but instead of forcing the run into the expected gap, he stopped completely, waited for Tyre Phillips to create a small gap on the backside, and then accelerate through it for a 15-yard gain. That's NFL level. Vision combined with patience you can't teach. His second impressive run showed power and balance. On a 3rd and short situation, he took a direct handoff, met a linebacker immediately in the backfield, absorbed the initial contact, stayed on his feet, and pushed forward to get the first down. For an undrafted free agent most people hadn't heard of, that sequence of plays was extremely encouraging. The defense was systematically dismantled, but Quinn was evaluating effort and technique, not necessarily results. Every missed tackle, blown coverage, and failure to disengage from blocks was cataloged for future roster decisions. The safety who was late covering the slot on the 28-yard touchdown, probably not on the team anymore. The cornerback beaten in press coverage. On a fade route, his days are numbered. Special teams were particularly revealing because they showed a fundamental lack of discipline that transcends individual talent. The punt return where we allowed an obviously unnecessary block in the back was inexcusable. The kickoff coverage where multiple players took completely inappropriate angles shows that some of these players simply don't understand their basic responsibilities. However, Quinn also saw some positives, probably not evident to the fans. There were players who maintained proper technique even as they were physically dominated. There were defensive communications that worked correctly despite a negative play outcome. There were effort plays where players ran 40 yards downfield to make tackles that wouldn't change the game's outcome. The true genius of Quinn appeared at halftime. Instead of making dramatic adjustments or changing personnel, he kept the exact same player rotation. He wanted to see who would respond positively to adversity and who would crumble under pressure. The players who showed fight in the third quarter, despite being down 35-3, are the types of competitors Quinn wants in his locker room, even as practice squad players. The strategy of using the preseason as an extended tryout has successful historical precedents. Bill Parcells was famous for doing exactly this with the Giants and Cowboys. Tom Coughlin did it during his most successful years with Jacksonville and New York. The best coaches understand that preseason games are perfect labs for evaluation, not mini versions of the regular season. Quinn is building a culture where no one can afford to coast, where every practice and every rep have real consequences. Players who survive these next cuts will know exactly why they're there and what's expected of them. There will be no confusion about roles, no complacency about job security, and definitely no tolerance for inconsistent effort. The timing of this humiliation was also perfectly calculated. Doing it in the first preseason game gives Quinn 4 full weeks to work with the info he gathered. Players who clearly don't belong can be cut immediately, freeing practice reps and coaching attention for those who do have potential. Schemes that appear fundamentally flawed can be scrapped or completely redesigned. Now I ask you this. Do you prefer discovering these weaknesses in August or in December when we're fighting for a playoff spot? Quinn is brutally honest about the current state of his depth chart, and that honesty is going to pay dividends when it really matters. The story of Lucas Niang is one of those sports tragedies that remind us how precarious an NFL career can be, but also perfectly illustrates why. Adam Peters is exactly the type of GM we need in moments of crisis. Let's start from the beginning of this saga, because context is crucial to understand the magnitude of what just happened. On July 24th, Nate Herbig, who had been a solid part of our offensive line depth last season, abruptly announced his retirement from football. This decision came completely out of nowhere. No injury reports, no media speculation, no hints that he was considering leaving the game. One day he was participating in training camp, preparing to compete for a starting job, and the next day he was officially retired from the NFL. Herbig's retirement created an immediate hole in our depth chart that Peters needed to fill urgently. It wasn't just a matter of numbers. Herbig was the type of veteran presence who knew multiple positions on the line, had experience in different blocking schemes, and could step in as a starter if any of our starters were injured. His versatility made him invaluable as the 9th or 10th offensive lineman on the roster. Peters immediately began evaluating options in the free agents market. The list of tackles available in late July wasn't particularly inspiring. Mostly journeymen cut during spring cuts, players dealing with minor injuries, and some veterans holding out for better contract offers. But Niang stood out for several specific reasons that made him the perfect fit for what Washington needed. First, his pedigree. Niang had been selected by Kansas City in the 3rd round of the 2020 NFL Draft, 96th overall. That draft position indicates that multiple NFL organizations saw genuine starter potential in him. TCU had produced reliable, offensive linemen in recent years, and Niang had been considered one of the better prospects in that class. His combined numbers have been respectable: 6'6", 315 pounds, with the length and athleticism that modern NFL offenses require from their tackles. Second, his experience with winning organizations. During his time in Kansas City, Niang had been part of 2 Super Bowl championship teams. He had practiced against Chris Jones, Frank Clark, and some of the most talented pass rushers in the NFL. He had been coached by Andy Reid and his staff, widely considered among the best offensive minds in the game. He had been in high-pressure, playoff environments where every practice rep matters. That type of experience is invaluable for a team trying to establish a winning culture. Third, his contract situation was perfect for Washington's needs. As a free agent, Niang was available immediately with no trade compensation required. His salary expectations were reasonable for a depth player, fitting perfectly within the cap space Peters had reserved for exactly these types of emergencies. There was no long-term commitment required, giving the organization flexibility for the future. When Niang arrived in Washington on July 30th, the early reports from training camp were genuinely encouraging. Beat reporters covering the team daily noted his professional approach during meetings, his willingness to ask questions about the system, and his work ethic during individual drills. Ben Standig, widely respected for his accurate reporting on team dynamics, mentioned that Niang was quickly picking up Cliff Kingsbury's offensive concepts. During practice sessions, Niang demonstrated the technical skills that had initially made him attractive to Peters. His hand placement and pass protection was consistently sound, showing proper technique refined during his years with Kansas City. His footwork and run blocking showed good fundamentals, particularly his ability to reach linebackers at the second level. His communication skills were evident. He was calling out protections, identifying Mike linebackers, and helping younger players understand their assignments. Coaches were particularly impressed with his versatility. During different practice periods, Niang took reps at left tackle, right tackle, and even some snaps at guard during goal line situations. This flexibility was exactly what Peters had been looking for when deciding to sign him. In a league where roster spots are precious, players who can handle multiple positions are incredibly valuable. Niang's understanding of different blocking schemes was immediately apparent. Kingsbury's offense incorporates concepts from multiple systems, some zone blocking schemes, some gap concepts, some slide protection packages requiring specific techniques. Niang's background with Andy Reid's system in Kansas City had exposed him to many of these same concepts, making his transition smoother than it might have been for other available players. The physical tools were still there despite some concerns about his injury history. At 26 years old, Niang was in what should be the prime of his career. His arm length, 34-plus inches, was ideal for handling MFL edge rushers. His core strength, developed over years of NFL strength and conditioning programs, gave him the necessary anchor for handling power rushers. His lateral mobility, while not elite, was sufficient for the types of passing concepts Washington planned to utilize. During scrimmage situations, Niang had been holding his own against Washington's pass rush rotation. Granted, the team wasn't going full speed during most practice sessions, but his technique and positioning suggested he could contribute meaningfully if called upon during the regular season. Position coaches were optimistic about his potential to handle significant snaps if needed. The injury occurred during what appeared to be a routine play in the second quarter against New England. Niang was executing a standard pass protection assignment, setting up to block a linebacker coming on a blitz from his inside gap. As he planted his left foot to establish his base, the linebacker made a sharp cut to his outside shoulder. Niang attempted to mirror the movement, but his foot remained planted while his knee and upper body rotated. The sound of the injury was audible even over the crowd noise. Players from both teams immediately knew something serious had happened based on Niang's reaction. He went down immediately, grabbing his left knee while being clearly in significant pain. The medical staff rushed onto the field within seconds, but the early signs were ominous. Niang was unable to put any weight on the affected leg, and he had to be helped off the field by two trainers. Dan Quinn's post-game comments were measured but concerning. As someone who has dealt with numerous player injuries during his coaching career, Quinn's body language during the press conference suggested he knew the news wasn't going to be good. His statement that they would evaluate everything and get the best medical opinion possible was coach speak for we're hoping for the best but preparing for the worst. The official diagnosis came 2 days later: complete anterior cruciate ligament tear, season-ending injury. For Niang, this represented not just the end of his opportunity with Washington, but potentially a major setback in his overall career trajectory. ACL injuries, while more recoverable than decades ago, still represent 6 to 8 months of rehabilitation with no guarantee that a player will return to his previous performance level. The business side of the injury was handled quickly and professionally. Washington placed Niang on injured reserve with a designation allowing them to reach an injury settlement. This protects both player and organization. Niang receives guaranteed money for his time with the team plus additional compensation for the injury, while Washington creates roster flexibility to address the sudden depth issue. Peters' response to this setback has been characteristically proactive. Within 24 hours of the diagnosis being confirmed, his staff was already evaluating replacement options. The timing, although unfortunate for Niang, actually works in Washington's favor from a roster management perspective. Other teams are making their final cuts over the next 2 weeks, meaning quality players who were simply victims of numbers games will become available. The type of player Peters will target to replace Niang is fairly predictable based on his previous moves. He'll look for someone with NFL experience, preferably someone who has played in multiple systems, and definitely someone who can contribute immediately if needed. The contract will likely be for veteran minimum with minimal guaranteed money, giving the organization flexibility to make changes if a better option becomes available. What makes this situation particularly frustrating is that Niang represented the exact type of value signing Peters has become known for during his time with San Francisco and now Washington. Low risk, high reward players who have been undervalued by other organizations, but can contribute meaningfully when given proper opportunities. The fact that this opportunity was cut short by a freak injury speaks to the inherent unpredictability of NFL roster construction. For Niang personally, the focus now shifts to rehabilitation and positioning himself for opportunities in 2026. At 26, he's still young enough to have multiple productive seasons ahead if he can return to full health. His Super Bowl experience and proven ability to contribute at the NFL level will make him attractive to teams looking to add veteran depth next season. But first, he has to focus on the long, difficult process of recovering from a major knee injury. The silver lining for Washington is that this injury occurred during preseason rather than at a crucial point in the regular season. Peters has time to evaluate options, work out multiple players, and make the base. What happened against the Patriots wasn't just a preseason game gone wrong. It was a carefully orchestrated exhibition of the philosophy Dan Quinn is going to implement in Washington. And if you understand the deeper implications of what really happened that night, you're going to see why this could be exactly what this franchise needed to finally take the next step. Quinn comes with a pedigree that most coaches in this league can only dream about. His journey to becoming the Commanders' head coach is filled with experiences that have shaped his understanding of what it truly takes to build sustainable success in the NFL. During his time as defensive coordinator with Seattle, he was part of the Legion of Boom, one of NFL history's most dominant defensive units. That Seahawks defense wasn't just talented. They were mentally tough, physically aggressive, and completely unified in their approach to every single play. When he moved to Atlanta as head coach, Quinn inherited a team that had been mediocre for years. His first season was challenging. But what he accomplished in his second year was nothing short of remarkable. The 2016 Falcons offense, coordinated by Kyle Shanahan, was one of NFL history's most explosive ever. But what made that team special wasn't just their ability to score points. It was their mental toughness, preparation, and belief that they belonged in every single game they played. That Atlanta team's run to Super Bowl 51 included victories over teams supposed to be significantly more talented. They beat the Seahawks in Seattle during the divisional round, dismantling the same Legion of Boom defense Quinn had once been part of. They destroyed the Packers in the NFC Championship game, completely shutting down Aaron Rodgers in his own stadium. These weren't fluke victories. They were the result of a culture Quinn had systematically built over 2 seasons. The Super Bowl loss to New England was devastating, but Quinn learned invaluable lessons from that experience that he's now applying in Washington. One of the most important lessons was about maintaining focus and intensity regardless of game situation. The Falcons' collapse in the second half wasn't just about play calling or talent. It was about mental preparation for adversity and the importance of never taking anything for granted. During his 3 years as defensive coordinator in Dallas, Quinn had the opportunity to work under Mike McCarthy and observe different leadership styles. The Cowboys had tremendous talent during those years. Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper. A loaded offensive line, but they consistently underachieved in crucial moments. Quinn saw firsthand how talent alone isn't sufficient. You need systems, culture, and mental toughness to maximize that talent when it matters most. His defensive units in Dallas were consistently among the league's best. But more importantly, they were known for their preparation and ability to make in-game adjustments. Quinn's defenses didn't just rely on individual talent. They were schematically sound, well-prepared, and mentally tough. Players like Micah Parsons and Trevon Diggs flourished under his guidance because Quinn created an environment where individual excellence was supported by collective preparation. Now, in Washington, Quinn is implementing all these lessons from day one. The decision to rest 30 starters against New England wasn't about disrespecting the opponent or not caring about winning preseason games. It was about establishing a culture where every single player understands that their position in this organization must be earned through consistent performance, not assumed based on draft position or contract size. The psychological impact of allowing those backup players to be humiliated on national television serves multiple purposes that most fans don't fully appreciate. First, it eliminates any possible complacency from the starters who weren't playing. Every starter on this team sat at home watching that game and was reminded of exactly why they're starters and why they can never take their positions for granted. The performance gap between starters and backups was so obvious that no player can possibly believe they're safe simply because they've had past success. Second, it gives Quinn perfect ammunition for every practice session moving forward. When a starter shows up to practice without proper intensity or focus, Quinn can reference specific plays from that Patriots game to illustrate the consequences of not being properly prepared. When a backup player complains about not getting enough opportunities, Quinn can point to exactly how they performed when they did get their chance. Third, it sends a clear message to the entire organization that this coaching staff values performance over politics. There were no protected players that night, no artificial limitations on who could be evaluated. Every player who was healthy enough to play was judged purely on their ability to execute when it mattered. This type of meritocracy is essential for building the type of culture that sustains long-term success. Quinn's approach to the Patriots game also demonstrated his understanding of modern NFL roster construction. In today's league, the difference between making the playoffs and missing them often comes down to depth and preparation. Teams that can maintain their level of play when key starters get injured are the ones that make deep playoff runs. By thoroughly evaluating every player in his depth chart during live game action, Quinn is building a roster where every player knows exactly what's expected of them. and exactly what they're capable of delivering. The film study sessions from that Patriots game have been invaluable to Quinn's coaching staff. Every missed assignment, every technique breakdown, and every communication failure has been cataloged and analyzed. But more importantly, every player who maintained proper effort and technique despite the game situation has been noted as well. Quinn now has objective data on which players can be trusted in adverse situations and which players fold under pressure. The integration of new systems is another area where Quinn's experience shows. Cliff Kingsbury's offensive system is complex and requires precise execution from every player in every position. During training camp, players were still learning routes, timing, and protections. The Patriots game gave Kingsbury the opportunity to see which concepts his backup players could actually execute under game conditions and which concepts need to be simplified or eliminated entirely. Defensively, Quinn got to evaluate his own system being implemented by his assistant coaches, watching how backup players responded to in-game adjustments, how well they communicated pre-snap, and how effectively they executed the fundamentals of his defensive philosophy gave him crucial information about both his players and his coaching staff's ability to teach the system effectively. Special teams coordination was particularly revealing because it's an area where preparation and attention to detail are absolutely crucial. The numerous breakdowns in coverage, missed assignments in return situations, and general lack of discipline showed Quinn exactly which players understand the importance of every phase of the game and which players are only focused on their primary position responsibilities. Quinn's post-game comments were carefully crafted to send specific messages to different audiences. To the media and fans, he emphasized evaluation and opportunity, downplaying the significance of the score while highlighting the value of seeing players in game situations. To his team, the message was different. This level of performance is unacceptable, regardless of whether they're starters or backups, and everyone needs to elevate their preparation and execution immediately. The comparison to other successful coaches who have used similar approaches is instructive. Bill Belichick famously cut talented players who didn't fit his culture, regardless of their draft status or salary. Tom Coughlin was known for his demanding practices and his willingness to bench stars when they didn't meet his standards. Andy Reid has consistently prioritized character and work ethic over pure talent when making roster decisions. Quinn is following that same blueprint, establishing from day one that playing for the Washington Commanders is a privilege that must be earned daily. The humiliation against New England serves as a baseline reminder of what happens when players don't meet the standard, regardless of their role on the team. Preparation for Cincinnati starts with the mental framework established during that Patriots loss. Every player who will be on the field for Monday Night Football understands the expectations, the consequences of not meeting those expectations, and that their individual performance reflects on the entire organization. That type of mental preparation is often the difference between teams that rise to big moments and teams that shrink under pressure. Quinn's long-term vision extends beyond just this season. He's building a culture that will sustain success over multiple years, not just produce a short-term improvement. The players who survive his evaluation process will be players who can handle adversity, who respond positively to high expectations, and who understand that their success is directly tied to their preparation and effort. The Monday Night Football game against Cincinnati will be the first real test of whether Quinn's approach is working. The Bengals will have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and the rest of their proven playmakers on the field. There will be no excuses about backup players or experimental schemes. Quinn will need to show that his starters, properly prepared and mentally focused, can compete with anyone in the league. But based on everything we've seen from his approach to that Patriots game, I believe Quinn has his team exactly where he wants them mentally. They've been humbled, reminded of the standards, and seen the consequences of not meeting those standards. Now they get the opportunity to show they've learned from that experience and can perform when the lights are brightest. Look, These are the moments that define a season before it really begins. Niang's injury reminds us how fragile this league can be and how important it is to have depth and preparation in every position. The humiliation against New England shows. That Quinn will not tolerate mediocrity at any level of this organization. And Peters' response to each crisis shows why he is exactly the type of executive leadership we need to take this franchise to the next level. Do you think Quinn made the right decision by sacrificing the preseason to build long-term culture? Do you trust Peters to find the perfect solution to replace Niang before the games that really matter begin? Are you ready to see how this team responds under the Monday Night Football lights against a Cincinnati team coming with every intention of making a national statement? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I need to know what you think about every aspect of these situations. If this in-depth analysis helped you better understand the direction our franchise is taking, hit like on this video and subscribe to the channel to continue being part of this community of true Commanders fans. We need to stay united as the family we are, supporting our team through the tough decisions and moments of adversity that will inevitably come during a full season. Because at the end of the day, we all bleed burgundy and gold, and together we will witness how this team reaches the potential we all know they have. And remember, hail to the Commanders!